What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to the first Modern Deck Tech of 2024. And today we're going to be taking a look at a deck that slowly got kind of pushed out of the format thanks to Rakdos midrange and all the other broken things that were going on. But now with the banning of Fury and Up the Beanstalk, it is starting to make a resurgence, and I feel the need to kind of reintroduce it, I guess, into the repertoire of decks that we're going to be looking at in Modern and get used to it because it's probably going to continue to be played one of the most played decks in the format, and we'll kind of go over why as well. But of course, before we get too deep into any of that, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing and ring the notification bell so you know when videos like this, Pioneer videos, and other things get posted. And if you want to links into the description down below, you will find a link to the deck list here. You will also find a link to the Discord server as well. Feel free to go over and join as well. So, Izzet Murktide is a pretty simple concept. If you are familiar with the deck, you're essentially like this blue-red tempo deck, and you have probably one of the best finishers in the format in Murktide Regent, and it's one of the best finishers for a few reasons, mainly because you're wanting to play spells to begin with. You have Dragon Rage Channeler to kind of get you a little bit more of a payoff for casting your plethora of 1 and 2 mana spells to kind of fill your graveyard and obviously get to a point where you can just delve away 5 instants or sorceries to the Murktide Regent to make it an 8/8. Conveniently getting to dodge cards like Unholy Heat, which deals 6 damage if you have 4 or more card types in the graveyard. So you need, this plus another spell to get rid of a Murktide Regent, which again is like a payoff that basically wants you to cast spells and mill cards, and you can do it pretty aggressively. You can kind of do it at your own pace, whatnot, and you are still able to, put this thing into play. It's going to be an 8/8, and you can back it up with cards like Counterspell and change the equation of the sword, even like the one of Force and Negation in the deck to kind of protect it and get you across the finish line in no time. Obviously, backing up this plan, Dragon Rage Channeler, Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, still probably one of the best 1-drop creatures available in the format. Even with a format that has gotten rid of Fury, but you still have Red and 6, you still have Orcish Bowmaster and the things. Ragavan is still a 1 toughness creature that is worth playing at all times just for the fact that it can just run away with the game. That's going to be the story of Ragavan till the end of time, is if, unless something better comes around, it's just going to run away with games that your opponent cannot check it right away. Even if it gets in 1 or 2 hits, the mana advantage that you kind of get from that, being able to cast all these other spells, is just really high. I mean, Ragavan, since it was printed, we all know that this is one of the best cards and one of the best creatures to play in the format. And even with all the things kind of going against it, it still continues to be one of the best creatures in the format. 2, Subtlety. This card is slowly kind of creeping up in play just in general. When it enters, you can target up to one creature or planeswalker spell and put it on the top or bottom of its owner's library. So you can essentially kind of use this as a kind of force of will, I guess, type card for planeswalkers. This is a way that you can play a Ragavan on turn 1 on the draw, and your opponent goes to play a Bowmaster or play a Red and 6. The Subtlety does give you a little bit of play to kind of counter them and let your Ragavan stick around for a turn. Of course, forcing them to tap out as well to kind of do that, and your Ragavan just kind of gets to go through unchecked for a turn, and essentially time walks your opponent pretty well as well, for the fact that that's probably what they're going to spend their turn 3 on. So Subtlety is just a really, really good tempo play, and you'll kind of find out that that's kind of Murktide's game plan is, win every turn, you're going to win the game. You have Lightning Bolts, you have Preordain, which I would say recently got unbanned, not in the last ban announcement, but the one before it. 4 copies of it. Pairs, of course, really well, just like with all these other spells. With Dragon Rage Channeler, helps you set up these kind of Murktide draws where it's just another cantrip. It's going to replace itself. You're going to be able to set up hopefully the next few turns, be able to dig for your lands. We're playing 18 of them, so definitely having a 1 mana spell that will help you find these very easily will help out in the long term. You have Change the Equation, which is kind of spell I brought up. Lets you counter a spell that costs 2 or less, or counter target red or green spell with mana value 6 or less. Just a nice little 1 of in the deck. Unholy Heats and Lightning Bolt's kind of like your removal. Spell Pierce, because you always get people with the 2 of Spell Pierce. Spell Snare as well is a pretty nice 1 of just to have around. You have cards like Expressive Iteration, which dipped in usage quite a bit, where Murktide was like one of the best decks, and you had all these other decks that were just like jamming Expressive Iteration into them. Well, now, Iteration is back on the menu now that people actually have the time to kind of cast some more cantrips, rather than just like having to jam a bunch of answers to a turn 1 Grief and getting double Thought Seized on turn 1, or getting Furied on turn 1. So that's kind of nice. Force of Negation, just the nice one of, it's kind of like a lot of these cards. Well, a few of them, but you know what I mean. Force Negation, just kind of like a nice way to kind of like tempo your opponent, protect your hand from like Thought Seizes, be able to counter like Rhinos if they play them off of Shardless Agent. And getting to exile the spell as well, doubly nice. 4 Mishra's Bauble, of course, kind of feeds into the Delirium plan, where we have like creature, instant sorcery, artifact. That said, this also kind of pairs very well with Dragon Rage Channeler, getting to get a Surveil and kind of set up almost like a turn 2, Delirium here, and Mishra's Bauble, of course, being the kind of the hardest one to get because it's the only artifact in your deck, but you have so many cantrips and the like, that you're probably keeping a lot of hands that have Mishra's Baubles in it with the attempt to draw enough cards to hit lands, or just the fact that, again, it pairs well with Dragon Rage Channeler and whatnot. The mana base, pretty easy. I mean, 18 lands. Really, I haven't seen a deck play like 18 lands since like Death Shadow was like one of the best decks, and I think I even played like 17 like way back when, just to be a little bit leaner on like the mana curve and stuff. But 2 Flooded Strand, 2 Misty Rainforest, you have a Scalding Tarn, you have 2 Delta, and then you have 3 Steam Vents, 3 Snow Covered Island, a Spire Bluff Canal, and 1 Otawara Soaring City. Obviously, Soken Zen doesn't really offer much in this deck, so just getting to kind of play Otawara as like your utility land, and then a bunch of other lands that are going to come into play untapped and ensure that you have double blue and red mana whenever you need them. Of course, playing the islands, because there's a ton of blue mana pips in here compared to the red, so you're just willing to kind of like fetch shock on turn 1 to play like your Ragavan or your Dragon Rage Channeler, or of course cast Lightning Bolt and Holy Heat, etc. And then you can fetch up some islands and stuff like that with your other fetch lands, which is why all the fetch lands are mainly blue, and you're not playing 4 Scalding Tarn, whatnot. Sideboard, you got Explosives and Flusterstorm kind of for the Cascade decks. Engineer Explosives is obviously getting to clean up the tokens. Flusterstorm as well, getting to essentially counter a spell unless your opponent pays 3, which is going to be pretty nice. Stern Scolding, we saw these against the Yawgmoth decks is pretty popular, and of course there's some other creature decks and stuff where you can counter some things with Stern Scolding, but I would imagine that it's probably more for the Yawgmoth decks. Casting a Fire for all the different ring decks, and of course you get a little bit of equity and be able to deal 1 damage up to 2 target creatures. Dress Down, another card that has seen less and less play kind of as we went on. Dress Down was very popular for a while. Of course, like this is like another card that you can kind of bring in against like the Yawgmoth decks, and against some other people that really care about like their creatures entering the battlefield. Of course, you can Dress Down and then cast a Subtlety, and you're not going to be able to get the like counter trigger on it, but you do get a 3/3 flyer to like stick around. Can be pretty dangerous if your opponent is kind of doing those sort of things, but at the same time, with something like Grief or even like Solitude, things like that, or Endurance, you'll take them having like a 3/4 if you're able to kind of like keep your graveyard around, so then you could just have a big Murktide as well. So pretty neat there. Some nice interactions and some key fusing interactions as well. Dress Down. Another Force Negation, 3 Magus of the Moon, because Blood Mooning people can still win you the game, and this can just, you put it into play, all your opponent's lands are mountains. Of course, Lightning Bolt, Unholy Heat running around, but even if they're not on that, if they're trying to be these 4 or 5 color decks and so on, Magus of the Moon, also puts a body into play that can end the game as well. And 1 Mystical Dispute. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of there's decent amount of like blue spells where like this is essentially like a hard counter in a way, or taps your opponent out to do the thing that they want to do, and you can then like spell pierce and whatnot. So, but aside from that, Mystical Dispute is obviously a worse mana leak, but definitely a lot better in a lot of the cases where you'd want like a mana leak in that situation. So that is Murktide Regent, Izzet Murktide for the modern format. I mean, overall, it looks a lot like the deck that we are used to seeing out of Murktide, where we're just playing a super tempo-y strategy. We're going to, use our spells. We're going to play Ragavans, and then we're going to protect them with Spell Pierce, Spell Stairs, Counterspell, and whatnot, and slowly kind of take over the game with some of the early threats. So then when we slam our late game threat, we are just all walled up, and it's going to be insanely hard to kind of beat through like Murktide, as well as getting it off the board once it hits. Definitely a deck to watch out for as we keep going into the format. I don't know if the format is necessarily solved yet, because obviously we had the bannings just over a month ago, or not even a month ago yet, technically. But overall, I think we've kind of settled into a spot where things are kind of starting to shake out, and like this is kind of how it is. And as right now, Murktide is the second most played deck according to MTG Goldfish. So definitely something to keep an eye out for, and just keep the thoughts in the back of your head of like how exactly you want to tackle Murktide, because again, it just kind of has a little bit of everything for everyone, and has like very few times where it's not going to have something for you. Like your opponent is always going to have some number of counter spells, or always have some number of removal spells, and it can just make life very hard for you, especially if you're not prepared to kind of tackle them and knock them off their game plan. So that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on the video, a comment down below what deck that you would want to see next. Of course, go to the links down in the description below, check out the deck, check out the Discord server, all that, subscribe. You know how it is. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.